And Joe, we got a very special guest joining us, and this guy, he's a controversial beat writer at some point with Jet fans, but every story he's writing lately is dead on. And this is gonna be awesome to talk to him. So, Manish Mehta, this is Joe and Tyson. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Well, Manish, first of all, thank you for joining us, man. I know it's a holiday season. You're really busy, so we appreciate a few minutes.
No problem. I'm actually out shopping right now.
Well, Manish, I think a lot of Jet fans owe you an apology because you write these stories about, Revis and then Mo Wilkerson, and all the backlash goes towards you, and now it comes out all your stories are spot on. Do you take, any satisfaction in that, or how does that go for you?
I don't know if I take any satisfaction in it. I mean, my job from day one has always been to report what's going on in the organization. A lot of the times that's favorable toward the organization. And sometimes it's not so favorable, and some guys aren't painted in a favorable light. It's interesting because, look, I grew up as a fan of sports as well, and you don't really get an inside at what's happening in the organization, and you have this perception when you're growing up as a kid. And to be perfectly honest with you, my favorite players in the NFL growing up were Randall Cunningham and Reggie White and Clyde Simmons and guys like that. And I didn't want to know, if those guys weren't good guys or if there were things going on that, I wouldn't particularly be proud of. But, as an adult and as a reporter, I have to report what's going on. And that means talking to people inside the organization, important people inside the organization, talking to people around the league about what's happening. And I understand fans are passionate and, they'll take out their frustration or their anger on me, and it's okay. It's part of the job. I get it. I'm a big boy. I understand that. But ultimately, what I want to do is convey to them what's happening with a team, with a situation, coach, player, whatever you want to call it. I don't have an angst toward anybody. I call it like I see it. There are a lot of good guys in that organization, a lot of great guys in that locker room, and then there's some guys who I think fans have a misguided perception of what they really are. And for Wilkerson, just to get back to that, I think for a long time I kind of knew what was happening with him, what he was all about, and it was only a matter of time before he revealed his true colors. And the fans are getting to see that. So do I get satisfaction out of it? I don't really care about that. I'm glad that the fans are getting an accurate perception of what this guy is all about.
Yeah, and I give you a lot of credit because you're usually front and center with these kind of things. You're not scared to report it. And like I said, there's a lot of backlash. And, as fans, we want to believe in the hometown kid. You want to see the guy do well. You kind of believe until, his speak. And then all of a sudden you see this and you're like, wow, this is crazy. Now you question McHagnon giving him the contract. You question kind of how Bowles has handled him. And that's the one question I have for you is, Todd Bowles benching him at Week 15 seems kind of like too little too late. What is your opinion on that?
Well, look, there are a lot of reasons for getting fined internally, being late for a meeting or being late for a walkthrough practice or missing a walkthrough practice, things of that nature. They come with varying degrees of punishment. It's funny because I was talking to someone earlier today about Wilkerson getting benched for the majority of the first quarter against Kansas City a couple of weeks ago. And I said, well, you know what, maybe Bowles should have been a little bit stronger, suspended him for that entire game as opposed to just one quarter. But you have to look at the bigger picture. And if I think Bowles had a viable alternative to play that game, he probably would have benched Wilkerson for that entire game. But given that I think it was Xavier Cooper wasn't completely healthy, and you might say, well, Xavier Cooper, who cares? But I think if he had a viable second option, he felt comfortable, and he wasn't really compromising his team, he probably would have been a little bit more forceful in terms of the punishment for Wilkerson. But once it happens twice within a 2-week period, in addition to all the times it's happened really since he took over in 2015, I think it got to a point where Bowles said, look, it doesn't matter even if we're going to be shortchanged here. I can't let this go on anymore. I respect Bowles for that. Todd gets a lot of grief from a lot of fans, I think wrongfully so. Sometimes it's warranted. He'll make some mistakes in-game. You guys don't have to hear that from me. You watched the Denver game, and I think there were some in-game management mistakes that he rightfully deserves to get criticized for. But the way he has handled his players internally for 3 years, I know a lot of fans don't really know what is going on. I think he's been extremely fair but extremely harsh at the right times. And that's the kind of guy, frankly, that this organization needs as a leader. And you can point to the record. You can point to whether he deserves to come back, whether he deserves a contract extension or not. But I can tell you, being around this organization for 3 different coaches, that he is handling his players the right way. I think he was a little bit lenient his first year, treating them all like grown men when, frankly, a lot of these guys weren't grown men. He should have been treated like children just to a certain degree. I think now, by year 3, I think he's striking the right chord in terms of getting the right players in that locker room for the most part and getting a cohesive chemistry and getting a lot of young, hungry football players who love to play the sport.
Manish, I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Joe, and I want to get your thoughts on how do you think some fans are saying that Mo should be benched for the rest of the year? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, the handwriting's on the wall, right? He's not going to be back. I don't think that they should cut him. I know that's been a sentiment out there because I think that would only do is potentially reward him. He could latch on to a playoff team, and why would you do that after he's behaved in the manner that he has behaved and treated your organization with such disrespect, really up and down, from ownership all the way down to his teammates, actually the training staff as well. I don't think it makes much sense to cut him. I would inactivate him for the last 2 weeks. He's obviously not going to play in New Orleans, so we're just talking about the Chargers and the Patriots game. I would make him inactive, and then obviously before he's due his guaranteed money on the 3rd day of the new league year in March, I would cut him. You want to explore opportunities to trade him, but let's be realistic about it. The teams around the league aren't stupid. They see what's going on. They look at his contract as it's currently structured, and it really doesn't behoove anybody to trade him if the Jets are going to cut him, and they can pick him up if they're interested at their own price. So I guess this is a roundabout way of me saying I would inactivate him for the remaining 2 games after this week. We'll see what Todd Bowles decides to do.
And it's funny you bring up that contract because I remember around the time before he got that big contract and we had franchise tagged him, we were on the show and we made a great case to, get rid of him and keep Snacks and move forward and taking that cash somewhere else. And they ended up, giving Mo the contract and getting rid of Snacks. Now, a lot of people put that squarely on the shoulders of McCagnon. How do you think, the way that Mo has handled this situation and his contract with implications within this situation reflect on McCagnon?
It was a mistake to do what he did, which was in effect give him a 2-year deal. I know it was a larger deal on paper in years and total value, but the reality is that he was guaranteed the $36.75 million in the first 2 years of the deal. I said at the time, I still believe it. They should have had him play on the $15.75 million franchise tag in 2016. Really make him play on edge and make him play for another contract. To tack on another guaranteed year of an additional $21 million didn't make sense then. It certainly doesn't look good now. So in effect, the Jets gave him $21 million for the production that he offered this year, which was minimal. They should have let him play on the franchise tag. If he had a tremendous season, could you have risked losing him? Yeah, he could have walked. He could have gone elsewhere. I would have taken that chance because I didn't think it was that big of a chance. I think the reality was that he was either going to underperform or play to a level where you could have re-signed him to a long-term extension. So making a preemptive strike by giving him the multi-year deal as opposed to just a 1-year franchise number, to me, was a mistake, and that does fall on Mike McCagnon. He's the general manager. I can tell you that there were people in that organization who matter who did not want to give Mo Wilkerson a multi-year deal at that time. They wanted to take the safer and ultimately the smarter path, which was making him play on the 1-year franchise.
Well, once again, we're speaking with Manish Mehta, who's very kind to give us a few minutes. And Manish, before we let you go, what is your take on Todd Bowles? You provide some excellent insight about his command of the locker room and command of the players. Do you think his job is secure at this point, or do you think there's still potential like a 3-game audition going on here?
Well, here's what I know. There is a 3-game audition. He's been auditioning really all season. So anything that really happens over the next 3 games, I don't think have any kind of tangible impact on what Woody and Christopher Johnson want to do. What I will say is that ownership is very keen on continuity at this stage. They want stability at the top of the organization, the GM spot and the head coaching spot. That hasn't always been the case. You don't have to look very far. John Idzik only lasted 2 years. And I think that the Johnson brothers are at a point right now where they want continuity. They're willing to be, quote unquote, patient to a certain degree. They're also fully aware that they're going to have about $80+ million in cap space to spend in free agency, in addition to, in all likelihood, a top 7-8 pick, depending on how these next 3 games go. They like Todd Bowles. I know that. I would tend to think that, barring anything catastrophic here over these last 3 weeks, that they'd be inclined to want to bring him back. You never fully know because you can't get in Woody and Christopher Johnson's head. But the indications I've gotten are that, there haven't been any kind of rumblings in terms of looking around for a replacement at the head coaching position. You rewind 2.5 years. Woody Johnson brought in Maccagnan and Bowles independently with the help of Charlie Casserly and Ron Wolf, with the idea of building this organization, building this franchise through the draft. And Woody at that time, and I don't think anything has changed, was fully aware that wasn't going to happen overnight. And it's a tough sell. I get it. Fans are frustrated. People pay good money to go to MetLife Stadium to watch his team play. But I just think you have to be realistic. I talk to people in other organizations in different markets, different cities, and they are astounded how anybody has success, frankly, at the professional sports level in New York, because there's such a need to produce quickly and produce right away. And you can say, well, look, in the NFL, you can go from worst to first pretty quickly. And yes, there are cases where that happens. But I think if you really want to have a legitimate chance of building a sustainable winner, you've got to have faith in the guys that you brought in. I don't think that Mike Maccagnan or Todd Bowles has done anything egregious where you would say these guys are clearly not the answer. We've got to start from scratch, because there are consequences from starting from scratch. You're going to have to take time, and the clock resets. You're going to have to rebuild again. Has Mike Maccagnan been perfect? No. There are missteps along the way, clearly. And I'm not just talking about the one that everybody wants to talk about, which is drafting a quarterback in the second round, which hasn't panned out to this point. I still think there's a future in this league for Christian Hackenberg, but I guess that's a different discussion for a different time. But he has made some solid choices, solid decisions, and there's so much stuff that Bowles has done that fans haven't seen, that fans probably will not see for a very long time unless he decides to write a book 30 years from now, or whenever he's done coaching football. But he has really remade this locker room and culture where, for the most part, he likes it. Now, look, there's some bad apples. Obviously, Mo Wilkerson is one of those bad apples, and he's not the only one. But for the most part, I believe this organization is trending in the right direction. And you guys know, you have read and heard me speak over the last, 7, 8, 9 years. I'm not the most favorable guy sometimes when things aren't going right, but I can see that Maccagnan is knowledgeable about picking players. I can see that Todd Bowles is a good leader, and I can see this organization trending in the right direction. Now, is it at the rate that the fans want? I don't know. I can't speak to every fan, but what I know is that they've got something here, and I think breaking it up after 3 years would be counterproductive to where everybody, coaches, players, ownership, GM, and fans ultimately want this team to go.
Manish, I got to tell you, I'm completely surprised with your take on Bowles, just to hear the insight you're providing, all that, because we take calls every week, and almost every Jets fan's fed up with Bowles. They question his leadership. Yeah. They question the locker room control, things like that, and you're kind of saying the complete opposite of what all the fans think, and that's just fascinating, man.
Well, it's interesting because if you're a fan, where's your window into Bowles? Your window into Bowles in the press conference, right, during the week and then after the game. And frankly, if I were a fan and all I had to see and judge Bowles off of was, in terms of personality, was what you saw in front of the camera, then I wouldn't be thrilled. I wouldn't be bowled over, no pun intended. I think that, the guy commands respect, and that is not an easy thing to do when you have 60 different grown men that you're in charge of. The guy, he understands football. Now, look, he's entrusted the offense to a first-time play caller in John Morton. And by the way, I don't know if you guys have discussed this. I don't even know if it's out there. But the game plans every week are built by John Morton and Jeremy Bates. Let's not get that confused here. Jeremy Bates is a significant part of the game planning for this team and has been all season. So, I don't want to diminish John Morton's role, and I don't want to call him a co-coordinator. I don't think that's necessarily fair. But Jeremy Bates has a big hand in how this team plans each week for each opponent. This is a guy who's called plays in Denver, called plays in Seattle as well. So he's been an invaluable resource. And anybody who knows anything about football, anybody who knows anybody who has an in to people who have been around for the last decade, know that Jeremy Bates is a fantastic coach. I mean, this guy is scared to death of the media. Don't get me wrong; he barely speaks to the media, and I don't think that's his thing to be out front and center. But I have talked to people who have worked with him, worked against him over the last 10 years, on and off over the last decade. The guy is an extremely smart coach, and frankly, I think the Jets might have hired him to be their offensive coordinator if he hadn't been out of the loop and been out of the NFL scene for a while. And again, that's not to diminish John Morton in any way, but I just know that Jeremy Bates, as a coach, as a tactician, NFL football guy, is extremely well respected. He's an important hire, and I think of all the different hires that Bowles has made in the offseason, the two hires that have been the best, by all indications, everything that I've heard internally, everything I've seen, everything I've heard from other teams, the two best hires by far, Jeremy Bates and Denard Wilson, who's their secondaries coach. I mean, those guys are leaps and bounds better than what Bowles had in his first 2 years at those particular spots. So, again, if you're a fan, you wouldn't know all of this stuff. And maybe, again, the fact that Bowles isn't the most charismatic person, doesn't have the most engaging outward personality, that I don't think that should cloud the reality, which is that he knows football. He's an extremely good leader. He has done his best to kind of rid himself of some of the issues in that locker room in his first 3 years. And I know it sounds simple, but if he gets a quarterback, I think this team is going to make a significant jump. And that could happen in 2018, because I don't know if the Jets are going to go all in for a quarterback in the draft, because if they did, and you would presume that would be Josh Allen, just given where the Jets are right now position-wise, that might take a year or two to develop. But if the Jets go in free agency and get a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, somebody who I had mentioned today in the New York Daily News, watch out. I think they could be a lot better, a lot quicker than some people think they are right now.
Yeah, and that was actually an excellent article on Teddy Bridgewater. But I guess just touching on Bowles before we let you go, would you give him a contract extension, or would you just let him come back next year?
No, I said it before the season. I give him a contract extension, and people said, well, that's nuts. I mean, why would you do that? How could you do that? I fall back on the stability, the continuity. I fall back on all the other stuff I said about him and why I think he is the right guy to be a part of this rebuild. You can't have him as a lame duck. That typically doesn't happen. It happens from time to time. I believe that Coughlin was a lame duck one of those years toward the end. But for the most part, you want respect in that locker room. You cannot have your players thinking that this guy's not guaranteed to be back the following year, so why do I need to listen to him? That can't happen. I mean, that is counterproductive on every possible level. So the notion of him coming back in the fourth and final year of his contract, 2018, without an extension, that doesn't make any sense. If the Jets are going to do that, then don't bring him back. That's silly. That's amateurish. So if you're going to bring him back, you got to give him an extension. Again, we'll see what happens over the next 3 weeks. But the indications I've gotten to this point is that ownership wants stability. They want continuity. They're happy with what Bowles has brought in terms of trying to clean up some of the issues that this franchise has had in the past.
Well, Manish, first of all, thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you for all your insight, man. We go after you sometimes because some of these articles, then like a month later, we're like, damn it, he's right again. So we definitely appreciate your time tonight, man, and we enjoy reading all your stuff.
Yeah, it's all good, and I understand the criticism, guys. I get it. I totally understand it. But again, my motive has been the same thing from the minute I started covering the New York Jets, which is to provide insight about what's really happening in the organization. Sometimes fans will take out their anger on me, but the bottom line is that I'm trying to provide them with what's happening. I'm not waking up in the morning thinking, hey, how can I rip the Jets today? That's not how I operate. I make the calls I need to make. I talk to the people in the organization who are important that I need to talk to, and I try to paint a picture to the fan base of what's actually happening.
No, and I give you plenty of credit, man, because you, like I said, you're usually front and center with that. And you make the bold comments or the bold articles, and they've been coming out dead on. So definitely give you credit for that. And thank you for joining us, and I hope you and your family have a great holiday, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. You too. Happy holidays.
Have a great night. Thank you, Manish.
Hey, anytime, dude.
Well, Joe, that was our surprise guest, and that was a curveball now because, I mean, you read all his articles and listen, I've ripped them endlessly, and then I had to backtrack all the time because all the stories come out, and you're like, son of a bitch, he's right. You know what I mean? And now you hear this stuff about Todd Bowles, and you hear about John Morton and Jeremy Bates, and I'm like, dude, I just got done ripping Todd Bowles about 10 minutes ago. So it's just like, that was a fascinating interview, man. That was some really good stuff from Manish, man.
Yeah, it was definitely, definitely shocking to kind of hear him talk about, if he was in charge, he would give Bowles an extension. And I understand, what he's saying. We're fans, and we only really see, the game day and the press conferences and then after the game. But, I don't know if I would give the guy an extension, especially when you're talking about his game management. Unless his game management gets better, I couldn't see the extension. But I do understand what he says when he says, the Johnson brothers definitely want stability there. They understand that they're in a situation where they're doing something they've never really done before, and they want to make sure that these players know, hey, this guy's going to be here. But that could be very interesting if they do end up giving him an extension.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. Like, I agree with the whole lame duck thing because when you bring a guy back like that, you have him sitting there. It's endless articles, dude. It's like, well, it's like you don't want to deal with that drama. Either you commit to him or he's gone. It's the way it works.
Yeah, but that again, that's kind of scary because again, if we're talking about committing to him, can you knowingly commit to a guy that has all these issues, has the game management issues, have the in-game decision issues that we've seen from time and time again? He even, Manish brought up that Broncos game that we just saw. I mean, that is pretty much everything, that a lot of fans have been talking about, the red flags that have been here for so long. So is that something you really want to commit to? I think that's a tough question, man.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was an interesting spot right there, man, because I was like, we've talked about him, we've read his stuff, and I'm like, all right, is he going to come on and be kind of combative, or is he just going to be cool? And he dropped his knowledge. He's like, listen, I researched my stuff, I have my sources, this is what happened, and it is what it is. And he's spot on with Wilkerson, though. And, like, as a fan, like, we are protective of our players because we want to believe the best in all our players. And then when we see this, we're like, dude, this is garbage. This is terrible. That was interesting, man. He gave us a lot of insight there. I'll probably have to go back and listen to that again because he shared all kinds of stuff on Bowles, McCagnon, everything. That was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of was. The Wilkerson stuff, I mean, he was right on. Again, he's a guy that, behind the scenes, he's seen a lot, and I'm sure he knows a lot more. And, just the impact of that guy doing some of that stuff in that locker room, I'm sure he could have spoke a little bit more on that as well. But I was really intrigued as well with, his take on Jeremy Bates, as a coach. And I've heard some of the same things, around the league that he said. That a lot of people really absolutely think that, Bates is a great coach and think he's very smart. And I think it's, really telling that those hires were made, with Wilson and Bates being brought in. Very good signings.